Hello and welcome to the Modern Compliance Podcast, the podcast where we talk about hot topics in the compliance industry and we share stories of other compliance experts who are going through the exact same things as you. So let's see what today's hot topic is. Hi everyone. In this podcast, I'll be interviewing Greg Byrne about whether UKAS accreditation should be mandatory for asbestos surveying companies and how this might affect the industry. Greg Byrne is an asbestos professional with over 30 years of experience. He's a strong advocate for mesothelioma awareness. For anyone who's listening, mesothelioma is the cancer that is caused by asbestos. And he's also a business owner. So welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you.
So I first spoke to Greg when we launched our asbestos reporting software, Flow Mobile Surveying, back in 2019. I did a highly impractical marketing campaign in one of my harebrained moments, and I sent handwritten letters to probably half the asbestos consultancies in the country. Greg was extremely kind enough to ring me. He had the good grace to ring me and said, "We don't need software right now, but congrats on the creative marketing." There was a really fun interaction and speaks a lot to your personality, Greg. Do you remember when you got that letter from me?
I do, yeah. I really appreciated it. And in my opinion, at that particular time, the industry really needed something that was, exactly what you do, but better, because there was really only two systems out there and they were both fairly clunky, difficult companies to work with to a certain extent. So somebody coming new to the market with fresh ideas, looking good, yeah, I was really happy to get involved and help in any way I could. Unfortunately, at the time, we just sort of signed up with another one of those two organisations, and if we hadn't, then I'm pretty sure we'd have jumped on board with you guys.
Oh, thanks so much for the kind words. No hard feelings whatsoever. It was a shot in the dark, that marketing campaign, I've got to be honest. And my hand was knacking from all those letters. I think it's only just recovered.
I bet it was.
So, I'd just like to chat today about UKAS accreditation, which is, at the time of this recording, a really hot topic. Can you explain to our audience what UKAS accreditation is and where it fits into the asbestos industry's landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the thing about UKAS, I should preface it really by saying, when I try and describe things, and I do this with clients, I try and make it as simple as possible for people to understand. And particularly with UKAS, you can make it complicated if you want. But in simple terms, what UKAS does is they look at an organisation and make sure the functioning of that organisation is up to a certain standard. So they'll go right from the start to the finish of your operation. They'll look at the quality manuals, the procedures, the training, and they'll make sure that whatever you do in that organisation, you're reaching a particular standard of work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the mission sounds great, right? And if you just think of the mission itself, it sounds fantastic. So I know that your company isn't UKAS accredited, despite being in the industry for a long time. Can you explain the reasons for that personal choice?
Yeah, there's probably two reasons. I think one, I must say, is a business reason. So if you look at the companies that are UKAS accredited, they tend to be the larger companies, and they tend to sort of work in a different sort of area of business to my organisation, in that they tend to move towards framework deals. So they might be with the NHS, large petrochemical companies, universities, housing associations, where you need a fair bit of resource to be able to service those customers. My organisation has never really worked in that area. We just avoid framework deals because some of them are raced to the bottom. You get clients who are sort of, I'll give you a great example. You're in a framework, it's Friday afternoon, and somebody says, "Can you just come down to Truro to take a sample?" And you could be going down there for absolutely no money. So certainly from a business and a profit point of view, we avoid them. And there's lots and lots of other customers who need services who don't fall into that category. So that was one reason. The other reason for me, and maybe it's a bigger reason, is I've never felt that UKAS really does what it's supposed to do. And I'm talking about surveying now. If you look at things like air monitoring, if you look at things like lab testing for asbestos, bulk sampling, then UKAS makes more sense because you're looking at a really kind of defined area of work. However, surveying is completely different in that with surveying, people are going around buildings and looking for asbestos, and it really depends the quality on the quality of that person doing the work, plus all the background information and data collection and things that are going on. So you could, as a private householder or a business owner, contact a UKAS company and ask for somebody to come out, and they've got great systems, but the guy they send out has got 3 to 6 months experience. You contact my company, you aren't UKAS accredited, and you won't get anybody with less than 15 years experience. So that never made any sense to me. And if you take that a stage further, I've been through the UKAS process with another company myself. And the thing I noticed was this particular company had 15 surveyors, but they only came out with one. So if that one person passes the inspection by UKAS, the other 14 are automatically UKAS accredited. So again, it didn't make any sense. So I think really what you have to do with UKAS is look at what it actually is and what it does. It really looks at the background systems within a company, make sure they're up to speed. And if you work in this business, you should be anyway, but it doesn't really solve the problem of surveyor quality at the front end of the people who go out and do the work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It makes sense. So what you're saying is because the accreditation is against the company, not the individual, then it doesn't really make sense in terms of surveyor competency. You could have someone who's fresh to the trade and on site, and they're considered UKAS accredited. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess that leads on to my next question then. What are the good and the bad things in your opinion about UKAS accreditation?
I guess I've covered some of them there. If you want to, one of the good things I would suggest is that if you're just an average business owner and you want to know if the people you're contacting, and let's remember a lot of these smaller business owners don't really know a great deal about asbestos. And if you want to know the people you're contacting have got some form of recognised accreditation behind them, that's where UKAS is really good because it lets the person who's making that call, who's making the inquiry, know that at least somebody's been through that company and had a look at them. That's where it's good. Where it's not so good are things like the cost. So certainly for smaller organisations, the costs are probably completely prohibitive. I know one who's going through it in a minute, and you're not going to get much change out of about 50 grand to be able to become accredited. And if you take my organisation, we probably get asked about UKAS accreditation maybe 3, 4, 5 times a year at most. And if we do, we just pass them on to UKAS accredited companies. Many people, particularly out in the general construction world, have no real idea of UKAS, what it is or what it does. So that's kind of another problem as well, really.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying on the positive side, it's kind of a stamp of approval, but on the negative side, it's maybe prohibitive for some companies to have this because of the price. And you're saying 50 grand over how many years would that be over, Greg?
But I mean, if you're putting it together for a first time, it could be as much as that in your first year, and that's not the fees so much, although the fees are a chunky part of it. But that's getting all your systems sorted, getting help potentially for smaller companies. You might need help from outside to get through that process. You might need to employ somebody who sort of looks after the UKAS element for your business. There's a lot to do there. Now, all the background stuff, my company do that anyway, but we do it without UKAS. So we have our own quality manual, quality systems. We have somebody external who is UKAS accredited, and they come and audit us. And we run pretty much like a UKAS company would, but we just don't feel the need for that UKAS accreditation from a financial point of view, or definitely from a business point of view.
That makes sense. I mean, you spoke there about some of the bad things and the good things about UKAS accreditation. If you had a magic wand, Greg, and you could wave it and something would happen, what would be the outcome to make UKAS better suited to small companies?
I think what UKAS, I can't say should do or would do because I generally don't think they would, is have a side of the business that is looking at the way the market is. So if you look at the market for asbestos surveying companies in the UK, they're generally split into really large ones with lots of surveyors, or small to medium sized ones like mine, and they are predicated completely on the larger companies. They don't have a facility to reduce their costs and manage smaller organizations. So if they had a much better fee pricing structure and were graduated, maybe smaller companies like myself would look at them a bit more seriously. But I generally don't believe that's going to happen. I mean, if you look at UKAS, they are what? They're a private limited company that don't distribute profits. They turn over about 40-50 million quid a year. They make about 8-9% profit out of that. The profits aren't distributed. They go back in and are kept as reserves. But the thing I notice about them is they've got about, I think it's less than 200 staff. Now, UKAS don't just look at asbestos. They look at pretty much every other standard there is. And everyone I speak to about UKAS says the same thing, is you just can't get them to do anything. They take so long because they're understaffed. You know, you wait 3 months, 6 months for a visit or a decision. So you suddenly start throwing hundreds of other companies at them. They're not going to be able to cope with it. So I don't think there's any practical solution involving UKAS, not in its current format anyway.
Yeah, interesting feedback. And I know from personal experience with our clients, there's a lot of small 1-2 man bands, certainly in the UK, who run their cash flow on a knife's edge. And I can imagine that adding the burden of the UKAS accreditation to that would probably put a lot of them out of business. Certainly, that's anecdotally what I've heard. Interesting to hear your point of view on that as well, Greg. So in terms of the industry, let's just talk about the industry for a second. I did hear through a client of ours that when they started, I know you've been in the industry for 30 years or so. When they started, I think they said 20 years ago, there was an abundance of sort of competent, qualified surveyors, and you could hire someone like that quite easily. Whereas now, they said someone with 2 years experience is considered senior. So in the 30 years since you've been doing this compared to when you started, why do you think there's been that change? What's caused that shift?
Yeah, it's a good question, really. I'm not sure. I mean, the number of surveyors out there in the industry has stayed probably relatively steady and then maybe increased a bit over the previous pre-COVID. And I think one of the drivers for that was housing associations who started increasing the number of properties that they were surveying. So more people were recruited, and then COVID hit, and a lot of them realized that, this particular industry isn't cracked up to what I really thought it would be, because particularly in the housing association market, they're being sent out, being asked to do 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 properties a day. And when I come across them, they all absolutely hate it. So when COVID came, there was quite a few went out of the industry. So that caused a problem then. And then post-COVID, it picked up fairly rapidly. And as you say, people now with 2 years experience are considered reasonably senior or reasonably experienced, which clearly they're not with 2 years experience. But also it meant that a lot of surveyors that come your way, and I'm talking about looking at CVs I might get, they've just done houses. So a practice like mine do everything from a dog kennel to a nuclear power station. So somebody who's just been doing houses is no good for us. We need somebody with 5-10 years experience who's been in lots of different types of buildings. So that in terms of the individual surveyors, the quality isn't what it used to be. The numbers aren't what they used to be. And speaking to a few of my industry contacts, they've been so bitten by trying to get quality surveyors that they're now actually taking on people with no experience at all, paying them a decent wage, giving them a car, and hoping that they'll stay if they look after them as they come through that process. So it's a real supply of labour problem in the asbestos surveying industry at the minute. And a lot of this kind of leads on to another point, really, which we may have covered later on or not, but I'll bring it up now, is you used to have this sort of, or UKAS companies used to sort of peddle this vision that their surveyors were better and more experienced than non-UKAS surveyors. I actually think it's probably gone the opposite way around, because a lot of people who were good surveyors got fed up working for UKAS companies, came out and started their own businesses. And some of those will be your customers. So you're getting people with 10, 15, 20 years experience as surveyors, and it's their livelihood. So they're doing a good job. And then you've got these UKAS companies who have got to basically service large contracts, and they're struggling to get surveyors. So they're bringing people in who are not particularly experienced. So it's almost flipped the other way around in some ways in terms of quality.
That's interesting. So you think the small companies maybe have the luxury of spending more time with the clients and doing a better job, I guess, if they're not under those same time constraints. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll give you an example. Most of the surveyors who come to me, the ones that stay, have been through the UCAS process. And what I do slightly differently is the first thing I say to them is, when you send off some samples and they go to the lab, I'm going to send you the lab result sheet. And they go, why? And I go, because that's what we do. And they go, yeah, but what you send them to me for? And I'm going, because you're taking samples in a building, right? You want to know if they're actually asbestos. And that's how you learn. But even more importantly than that, labs make mistakes. So you're checking the lab hasn't made a mistake. And they go, right, okay. And I go, when you've done that, you're going to feed the results back to the client. And they go, yeah, but that's not my job. And I go, yeah, it is your job, because that's how you learn. That's how you learn to talk to a client, inform them, you help them, you learn more. And then I'm going to send you your report and you're going to check it. And they go, I've never checked a report since I've been in a UCAS company. And I'm thinking, this is bonkers. So these people, how are they learning to be a good surveyor? And that's the way you learn, is by checking everything you do, reading up on stuff, speaking to customers, checking your reports. It's the only way.
So just talking a little bit more about the skill drain, are companies, in your experience, doing enough to train and develop the next generation of surveyors in the asbestos industry? Have you noticed any trends here?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier. I think out of sheer desperation now, what they're actually doing, some of the more forward-thinking ones, is they're just kind of blanking the market because they just can't get anybody who's decent. You get the same CVs coming around time after time. I mean, we let somebody go who just wasn't suitable. I've had his CV back maybe 7 or 8 times.
Wow.
So people are going around the loop. So what some people are doing, like I say, forward-thinking, is going, let's train people up from scratch. And hopefully that'll, and pay them a decent wage. I mean, the wages have gone up significantly, certainly since COVID. I mean, surveyors were kind of starting around the 24 to 28 mark. Now you're probably starting around the 28 to 35 mark, that sort of order. So it's gone up a lot. So I think it will attract more people in, but what they need is a decent training program. I know other companies, maybe like AEC, have brought people in like on a 2-year sort of program, which is great. But when you speak to some of their guys who've gone through that, they feel like it sort of drags on too long, and they're not given enough opportunity to move up a bit quicker, and they get stuck in particular roles. So, at least AEC were trying, and some of the others are now being forced to do stuff like that as well.
And I know that AEC have their own dedicated training center, right, where there's like mock buildings you can go and survey, which sounds really interesting. I was speaking to a chap the other day who said he ran a sort of fairly big asbestos consultancy, and he said the problem was that they would spend 6 months to train someone up, and then after that 6 months, it might just turn out that they're not suitable. Maybe they're not detail orientated enough to do the work, or they decide, this isn't for me. I'm going to leave the industry, or worse still, they join the company and then go off and work for a competitor. So you've trained up the competitor's best surveyors. So I don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a common problem. So if you kind of throw recruiters onto the back of that as well, I mean, we have recruiters who will send us somebody. They'll start work for us. 6 months later, they're on the phone. All my staff are constantly being harangued by recruiters to go move somewhere else for an extra 50p, a car, a cuddle, or whatever else. But what you've got to do is build those relationships with them where they don't want to leave. Unfortunately, we managed to do that. But, for the larger companies, that's much harder because, like I say, they've got these big contracts to service. They've got to send people out to do 5, 6, 7, 8 houses a day. And these people get really fed up with it. So they think, I'll try somewhere else. They go somewhere else and they end up doing houses again. So it's almost a vicious cycle.
The grass is always greener on the other side, isn't it? So, Greg, at the time of this recording, there's an HSE consultation to decide whether UKAS accreditation should be mandatory. What are your thoughts on this?
You can see why they're doing it. Where's that push come from? I'm not sure, because I know the HSE have been out and spoken to the industry and looked at the quality of asbestos surveys, and this is their words. There's pretty much no difference in the quality of the survey between UKAS and non-UKAS. As they say, there's good and bad in both. So where's that coming from? It could be coming from UKAS companies, potentially. Personally, I think it's a bad idea. It's too much of a large change, because, I mean, if you take a step back and look at the asbestos industry, look at what we do, what we're doing a lot of the time is looking at buildings that were built before the year 2000, surveying them and giving them an asbestos survey. What percentage of buildings in the UK have actually got that survey? We don't know, but we think it's maybe 20 to 30%. So 2/3 haven't. So that's lots and lots of properties that still need surveying, and there's no information, and people are going into those properties and potentially exposing themselves to asbestos. So if you chop out what is potentially half the workforce, how are you going to solve that problem? You just can't. What we need to do is find a way of bringing the non-UKAS surveyors, companies like myself, in some way, and bringing them to an acceptable level, standard, accreditation of something, probably not UKAS, which will make the HSE happier. Customers might understand it a little bit more. They probably won't, to be fair, but it needs to bring that side forward to a level rather than chop it off and go, you need to be UKAS accredited. Because if you do that, many of them will just leave the industry because they can't afford to do it. And you'll be losing some of the best, most valuable surveyors at a time when we're struggling to get really good qualified asbestos surveyors. So it's a fool's errand, really, if they do it.
Yeah. So you're saying, sort of combined with that skill drain and the fact that there's kind of a wider problem here, in that a lot of buildings just haven't been surveyed at all, rather than, making UKAS a mandatory thing. We do need those surveyors in the industry to actually continue this work and to make sure that people are safe and buildings are surveyed properly.
100%.
Yeah, makes sense. And so
Absolutely.
instead of UKAS accreditation being mandatory, Greg, what other options could the HSE consider, do you think?
I think what the HSE want, and it's fair enough, is they want it to be industry led. Back in the day, not that long ago, there was a couple of individual surveyor accreditation routes, ABICs, NIACs, I think they were called. They didn't really take off. I'm not sure why. I remember looking at them thinking they just didn't seem right for what we wanted, and very few people sort of took them up. We need a version of that, but we need something that will work for people, so it will be attractive to them, not overly expensive. What we're trying to do is encourage people to develop their skills, because if you think about phoning a building surveyor to come to your house because you're selling your house, the guy's probably got 5 years experience in terms of doing a course, having a degree, etc., etc. You phone an asbestos surveyor, and he could have done a 3-day course and not much else. So we're way behind in terms of qualifications. What we need to be doing is getting them on some kind of continuing professional development, where they're learning all the time on the job. They're building up a portfolio of work they're doing. They understand the regulations. They know how to talk to customers. They're helping people go through the process from start to finish. It's not just a survey. That's the starting point. It's the asbestos management plan. It's the training. It's the re-inspections. It's the whole process. And what we need to do is take people on that journey, customers, clients, surveyors, everybody. So we need to find a way within the industry of doing that. Now, I know people are talking about it, but it needs somebody to kind of put their hands up and go, well, here's a starter. What about this? And then somebody else join in, and it gains some kind of critical mass. That's probably the best way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting points about that surveyor who could turn up with 3 days experience, and it's quite worrying in a sense. And a lot of other trades that I understand, like if you're an electrician or if you're a plumber, you would be personally kind of accredited, the competence is against the individual rather than the company. It seems strange that, in this industry, that's not the case. I've got to be honest. When we came into the industry, I found that surprising. So do you think, Greg, the cost of UKAS accreditation, do you think it's justifiable for new or small surveying companies to go after?
No. I mean, maybe 1, 2, up to 3-man bands. No chance. Unless they've got a big war chest, or somebody's lent them a load of money, or maybe a relative's passed on and left them a chunk of money. Once you get to about 4 upwards, then it's probably more of a possibility. But how do you get that money back? I mean, if you want to work in for clients who want UKAS, then potentially it could be quite lucrative. Personally, I've never wanted to do that. I'll give you an example. I've looked after pretty much all McDonald's, the fast food organisations, 1,500 to 2,000 properties for 20 years. I'm not UKAS accredited. They know I'm not. What they want is good quality surveyors, good quality service, someone at the end of the phone. That's what they really want. So it's horses for courses, I suppose. I mean, my business is set up to avoid doing large, like I said, these large contracts. So if somebody wants to go down that route, then fine, albeit, because it will probably help them. But for most of us, we just want to do what we do a good job, and keep doing it. So we need to find a way of getting us some form of accreditation or recognition.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying currently with UKAS accreditation, unless you're going for those tendered frameworks, there may not be any advantage to it. If you're still following the processes and you're still following the good practices that a UKAS accredited company might, then yeah, there's no kind of business benefit to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no point.
Interesting. So let's talk a bit about the impact of mandatory UKAS accreditation, Greg. If the HSC consultation goes in favour of making UKAS accreditation mandatory, what impact do you think that would have on small asbestos surveying companies across the UK?
Yeah, I think we touched on this earlier. It's some of them will either go out of business. They maybe have to sort of throw their hat in with other UKAS companies, which basically means they're giving their business up and becoming a surveyor to a certain extent. But the big impact really will be on the industry in terms of the number of decent surveyors available to be able to do that work. It will drain the quality end of the market in terms of surveyors to a large extent, and will cause a problem, particularly, as I said earlier, when we're trying to get more companies, organisations to actually get their premises surveyed and, more importantly, manage asbestos. They really do. I can think of one particular UKAS company, and this was a couple of years ago. They called me up because they know I do a lot of asbestos management plans, hundreds of them. I'm not sure I should say this, but we actually give some of our asbestos management plans away free to smaller organisations, just so they actually do it. Okay. And they contacted me and said, we've got an inquiry for an asbestos management plan. Are you interested? And they've got like 25 surveyors. And I said, what do you mean, am I interested? And they said, well, we don't do them. And I said, what do you mean you don't do them? He said, we don't do asbestos management plans. And I went, why not? They weren't, because our clients are not really interested in them. I'm thinking, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. That is the number one most important element, far more than the survey. And when the HSC, and hats off to the HSC, they're currently going around schools, councils, and lots of other organisations, they're asking to see their asbestos management plan. And that's when I'm getting phone calls saying, Greg, we haven't got an asbestos management plan. So it doesn't, like I say, it's really important that we look at this in the right way and do the right things and take a step back and not make a sort of a quick knee-jerk decision, because it'll be completely counterproductive.
Yeah, and that sounds like great work that the HSE are doing there with the schools and the management plans. And sometimes, like, sort of in my experience, like, it's hard to see the macroeconomics of, like, when you do something like this, you don't know what the wider implications are going to be. And from what you've said, one implication of that could be that half the talent in the industry suddenly just leaves, and suddenly, you're left with less surveyors to do more surveys as the asbestos deteriorates. Obviously, it becomes more of an issue, as we know, in schools and places like that. So, yeah, I imagine that it's hard to see the big picture in a sense.
Yeah. I think also in that big picture, Paul, what we need to remember is what's the end result of all this? Is exposure to asbestos and death and mesothelioma, and it's not really gone down in my lifetime. It's maybe just tipping over the edge now. And when I do training courses, I'll say to people, one of the first questions I ask is, what's most likely to kill you at work, or in your working life, at work, anything to do with work? What's going to kill you? And they all say the same thing: fall from heights. And they all go, okay, how many died in fall from heights last year? 20 or 30 people maybe. How many people died from asbestos last year? Over 5,000. That's the problem, because people are still dying in their thousands every year. And the big problem for asbestos, it's always been, is that if you fall off a building, it kills you straight away. You breathe asbestos in, it may kill you 40 or 50 years later. So again, it's the big picture we need to be looking at, and let's not shoot ourselves in the foot by getting rid of loads of good quality surveyors. Let's round them up and do something good with them.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. So in your opinion, Greg, will the overall quality of surveys delivered to clients, would that improve if UKAS accreditation becomes mandatory, or would it not improve?
It won't change. Why would it? The HSE have said themselves the quality of surveys between UKAS and non-UKAS is virtually no different. So why, by making everyone UKAS, will it make it better? That makes no sense. Yeah. I mean, if UKAS went out with, if I've got 10 surveyors and UKAS came out with all of them on a irregular basis, then I'd have a bit more sympathy. But when they're coming out with 1 out of 30, next time they come a different 1 out of 30, next time they come maybe a couple of different ones out of 30, I could be there for 15, 20 years surveying, and I've never been inspected by UKAS. So that's not going to improve the quality of the surveyor. You've got to remember as well, I mean, I keep banging on about this and people are probably fed up about it, but in my role for the last 5 years, I've been auditing UKAS accredited surveys as part of my role. I can't go into what that role is, but it's for a third party outside customer, and probably 10 to 15 different UKAS companies, mainly in the social housing sector. And the standard of those surveys, if they went out of my particular company's office, I'd be embarrassed. They're really, really poor, some of them, right? Now, these are UKAS accredited, and some of them, these are desktop surveys and audits I'm doing. So I'm not even going to the site to see the quality of what the survey's been done. I'm just looking at the paperwork that's provided. And it's really poor, and it's really disappointing after all this time. So is UKAS fit for purpose? I'm not 100% sure. Not from what I'm seeing.
And I guess on both sides of the fence, whether you're UKAS accredited or not UKAS accredited, there's going to be good and bad firms, right? You can't say like, if you are UKAS accredited, you're going to be great. If you're non-UKAS accredited, you're going to be terrible. It really is down to individual competence. So, what effect do you think it would have on the surveyors that remained in the industry if this goes ahead, Greg? If for those ones that remain, and if UKAS becomes mandatory, what effect would it have?
Again, I think we touched on this earlier a little bit. It's there's your choice. What do you want to do? You either leave the industry and go and do something else. You find something that doesn't involve UKAS within the industry, doesn't involve the accreditation element, or you join up with a UKAS company and take what you get. There's not really a lot of choice.
So the Work and Pensions Committee recommended a 40-year deadline for removing all asbestos from buildings, which is seen by many as being impractical. If UKAS accreditation becomes mandatory, how will it affect those plans, in your opinion?
I think you probably need to take that into 2 parts. If UKAS accreditation becomes mandatory, it will slow that process down. So the 40 years will be pretty much unattainable. And in and of itself, the 40-year thing, it's it's a headline, maybe to sort of generate interest and get people to think about it. It's completely impractical because, I mean, let's take a simple product like a damp-proof course, stuck between the bricks in a school in the walls. Are you going to take the school walls down to remove something that is about as low risk as you can get? No. What we need to do, if they want something sensible, is look at maybe getting asbestos out of all public buildings, schools, colleges, universities, hospitals in that 40-year period. That might be a bit more attainable. But when we say get all asbestos out, not all asbestos, the stuff that's really likely to affect people, the high-risk stuff, the stuff that's customer-facing or contractor-facing, the stuff that's out of the way that's never going to bother anybody, you could probably leave that there and manage it. But yeah, that's why most people in the industry said it was impractical, because it is impractical, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. I've heard that from a few people, and it seems impractical. Certainly, I'm no expert, but yeah, from these conversations that I have. Thank you so much for this interview, Greg. I've really, really appreciated it. Tell me what's next for you. What's next for Greg Byrne?
Yeah, I'm supporting my organisation from the cheap seats now. It's been passed over to a new set of directors. Our existing ops manager, Paul Gallagher, and his wife, Sally. Paul's been with us for 15 years. He's a fabulous bloke, great integrity. And we had a few people look at our business in terms of taking it over and buying it. But it was never about the money for us. It was about, because we've got great staff, we wanted to keep them together. And we've got some amazing customers we've built up over the last 20, 30 years. And I didn't want them to be sort of carved up. And I also didn't want them to have to go to a company whereby they weren't serviced to the standard they are now. So it was a great decision. We've passed the business over to Paul and his wife, and I'm sort of in the background helping out, still doing the auditing. I'm just not crawling under buildings and sort of crawling through rats, mice, and all the other horrible stuff anymore. So that's the best part of 40 years surveying. And I'm kind of glad now. It's a bit like, I mean, for a footballer, you get to pack it in about 38, 40. I shouldn't be doing it at my age now, but there you go. It's I'm supporting from the distance.
Well, first of all, congrats on exiting the business. I'm sure you worked very hard to get where you are now. And yeah, I've got a lot of admiration for you wanting to keep the team together. It sounds like you've built something really special there. Thank you so much for this interview, Greg. I hope everyone who is listening and watching has enjoyed this content, and have a great day. All the best. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this content. I hope you got something out of it. If you know anyone else who is affected by this topic, please forward this on to them. If you've got a hot topic you'd like to discuss, please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Let's keep this conversation going, and we'll see you next time.